So excellent. With that, yeah, don't have much else to say. You're going to hear from a number of the team here. And certainly at any time, if you have questions, it doesn't just have to be at this meeting. We're always open to hear from you. And I would say just sit back, enjoy the meeting, and then we'll roll from there. So with that, Janet, I think, am I passing it to Matt, perhaps?
Yes, Matt Wilson,
Perfect.
you are up.
Yeah, you should hopefully can see my screen already.
Yep.
I am just working from my laptop, so if there's any chat questions, Janet, just let me know. I can't see the chat right now. So, yeah, welcome everybody. Great to be back for another year, James. I think you said the 26th time we've done this. I'll have to count. So I've got my normal update for you from approvals. And Brittany's going to give a bit of an update on source water protection. We've also got some information for you on housing capacity pieces. There are some questions around swine housing and layer barn housing. So we've got Steve Beadle and Dan Ward with us today that will walk us through a bit of that information. And then we've got some updates from MECP as well. So hopefully a well-rounded meeting for you and can get you what you need. We also have time at the end for questions. We've had a few come in through registration that we'll address, and then open it up for any others that come up through the meeting. And don't be afraid to put any questions as we go through in the chat, and we'll get to them at an appropriate time. So as I've shown in previous years, we've got our fancy new database that gives us some nice numbers and graphs and things. So I was able to pull the 2025 numbers. Overall, I'll start out as I think 2025 can be summed up as a very average year. The number of submissions coming in, you can see for strategies was 576. NASM was 504, and that's right in the ballpark of what we expect. Those numbers in brackets are the plus minus from 2024. So you can see a few less strategies, a few more NASM, almost equals out. One of the things that we're very proud of is our turnaround time. We were down to, you can see on average there, 10 days for strategies and just under 10 days for NASM. So able to drop that by 4 days for strategies and close to 4 days for NASM. Just one note of caution: our service standard still is 50 days, and we are seeing high numbers coming in this year. So please don't expect that 10 days. We do really try to stay well under that 50 days, but that is our number. So please help us manage your clients' expectations. Don't tell them that, hey, last year I got it back in a week. That shouldn't be a problem this year. It could be. We never know. We're hoping we can get things out as quickly as possible, but just a caution: don't expect 10 days. That was a very exceptional year, and we always strive to get things out as quickly as we can. You can see across the bottom, it's hard to see, but just showing the distribution of submissions, and these are strategies where they came in across the province. I think this year is actually County of Grey came in as number one and just beat out the County of Wellington. If I had last year's, you'd see it very close in the rest, but County of Grey was number one in 2025. You can also see the bar graphs is the livestock types that were in those strategies, the predominant livestock type. And again, pretty similar to what we've seen. Dairy and chicken, followed by beef, is what we saw in 2025 and what we normally see. This slide just shows where our approvals are. The green is strategies or land with strategies, and those are dots. So each property would have a dot on it for strategies. The brown, which is hard to see, is NASM, but they are spread out throughout. So you can just see, and again, if I had a yearly yearly map, you'd see it becoming more dense and dense on the green and brown as we fill in more and more phased-in farms over the years. So I'm not sure if you can see it. I can't. Yeah, there it is. We're very close to 9,000 phased-in farms with strategies and plans when required, and 2,100 or 2,176 NASM plans, and that's active NASM plans. As they cease, that number comes out, and this was as of January 1st, I believe. So I would be pretty confident to say we're over that 9,000 mark now for strategies. Across the bottom, you can just see again the predominant livestock type in those close to 9,000 farms, and dairy number one, followed by chicken, and very closely by beef and swine. Yeah, I think I've covered this one for you, but this one's a little bit different, just showing the size by nutrient units of what we're seeing in the submissions, and that 5 to 150, which is probably no surprise, is the predominant number. That's the size of the farms coming in strategies, and that is as well creeping up over the years. Just some reminders on strategies and NASM plan approvals. As I said, we're always striving to get that turnaround time as quick as possible, and absolutely you are to credit for that quick turnaround time last year. The hard work you're putting into your submissions is what's really helping us turn them around. But just a few reminders. We can always strive to do better. On how you can make our jobs that much more efficient and get those submissions out that much more quicker for your clients. Still a bit of an issue. One PDF we're looking for, and Shannon deals with those when they're coming in. We need that one PDF. If not, she will send it back and ask you submit it as one PDF. So save yourself some time and just submit it the first time as one. Complete and accurate. Really what we're trying to say there is take 5 minutes and scroll through your submission before you hit send. You'd be amazed the number of submissions we see with missing pages, missing overviews. I forgot, that's the wrong sketch that doesn't have any dimensions on it. Just go through very quickly. I'm not going to say quickly, efficiently. Make sure everything's there. You're submitting what you think you're submitting. That really helps with some of the back and forth. Scanned documents are legible. If you can't read it, we can't read it. If you're putting it through a scanner, again, take a look to make sure it's legible when it's coming in as part of the submission. Submit that .nms file. Metric versus imperial. This is probably just an issue in strategies, and I'm guessing it's mostly an issue for those doing strategies and NASM plans. Make sure your AgriSuite is set up to the right units. We do see strategies coming in metric, and you can definitely do them in metric, but then all the rest of the information needs to be in metric as too. You can't give us metric dimensions in AgriSuite and then imperial dimensions on the sketch. It's got to be the same. PDF file size. This is one that gives us an issue sometimes when we're seeing 20, 25 megabyte files coming in. Take a look, see what it's coming in as. A lot of times if you're scanning documents or including engineer reports or something, those can sometimes be really big. And if you can condense those down and then add them to your submission, really saves you and us some space. And Shannon will likely send things back if they're too big. Another reminder just on official documents, don't modify them. So reports, other reports, signatures, dates, information in them, they need to be, that you can't modify official documents. If you're doing summaries or something, just make sure it's very clear that that's your work on the document, or submit a separate page with that work. We can't have modified documents. And just a note from strategy reviewers, overview of the operation, only include information in that overview of the operation that's required. Don't duplicate information from your AgriSuite printout or your sketch that's not required. Things like property information, storage dimensions, not required. It really just adds an extra step for us to make sure that, if you give us dimensions in an overview, then we got to double check that dimension matches AgriSuite. Then we got to make sure that dimension matches the sketch. It's an extra check. If there's an issue, then often we got to come back to you. Did you update the 3 places? 2 to 3 times you didn't. We got to go back to you again. It's just an extra place. Issues can happen. Information's already there. We don't need it. Please just give us the information that's required. A few other reminders. This one is smaller text for you, but when we're doing a request for additional information, this is not new. We're asking for a complete submission, whether it's a strategy or a NASM plan. Make sure you address all the points in the RAI. Again, go back through and really make sure you're addressing our questions. Some consultants, when we send that RAI, they send it back. If RAI point was, a dimension was off, they'll give us a statement saying, dimension has been verified and updated on the sketch. That's perfect. We know you've addressed it. We can quickly check and we can move on with that submission. .nms file, again, if you're changing things on AgriSuite, we need an updated .nms file. Amendments, again, just reminders. There are requests for amendments forms, and these forms really just help us streamline our review of those amendments. It lays out what's changing, what's not, and helps us really get through that efficiently. And again, we're looking for a complete package, whether it's a strategy or a NASM plan. And you'll see the wording in those amendments has changed over the last couple of years, where we're basically saying this new amended strategy is replacing the previous approved one, and that's why we need that new full package. Strategies, a few other reminders or common errors that we're seeing. Address the nutrient loading and housing capacities in your initial submissions. For those of you that have been doing this for years, you know the questions we're going to ask. If your housing capacity is off by that rule of thumb 20%, we're going to be asking you questions, and that 20% is not a regulatory number. That's a number that we are comfortable with. In most cases, we may still ask you questions if that number, if you're not matching the estimated number that's in AgriSuite, and I've got some slides coming up on that as well. Barn schematics, layout sketches, more information coming on that, but very helpful for us to understand the numbers you're using in AgriSuite. On those sketches, making sure you're giving us that key information. When you're transferring manure off, making sure you're giving us a quantity in AgriSuite. And again, come up with a little bit of a checklist, and you should be able to take from the RAIs that we're sending you things that you're missing. If you can have your own checklist on making sure those things are captured before you submit, that's going to save you and us time in the process. Wall heights is one that we asked for in AgriSuite, and it's really just, I've had questions as why do you ask for wall heights? Why not just go by the depth of the manure? Because the way the reg is written, if your wall height is over 1 meter for solid storages, that triggers the need for engineering. If you don't tell us how high that wall is, we don't know if engineering is required, and we don't know if you've given us the required engineering form. So please put that information in, and it's a simple box in AgriSuite. Enter it in, and we'll save yourself an RAI. And there's that piece on the overview again. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Brittany. Brittany, I can flip through your slides. Was there any questions? I can pause there. Any questions anybody wants to ask before we move to source water protection? I'm hearing none, so Brittany, I'll pass it to you.
Great. Okay. You can hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Okay. I'm in a field office today, so I'm going to keep my camera off because bandwidth is a hot commodity out here, I think. Okay, yeah, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Brittany, and I'm environmental specialist with our unit. And I also help with incorporating source water protection into the nutrient management program. Today, I'm going to just give a quick update on some of the source water data from last year, as well as run through a few changes to the Clean Water Act that MECP is making and how they might affect nutrient management. Next slide, Matt. So there are two sides to source water when we're doing our review of nutrient management strategies and NASM plans. One side is reviewing the new submissions that come in throughout the year to to check for those vulnerable areas and source protection policies. And the other side is taking a look at approvals that we have previously issued and see if they're now impacted by source water. This can happen through the expansion of an existing drinking water system or the creation of a new well in vulnerable areas, both of which could cause an existing approval to overlap with a vulnerable area where there wasn't one at the time of approval. So this is just a quick snapshot of what we found last year. We had just over 1,000 total approvals in 2025. And of those, only 21 combined strategies and NASM plans were found to be impacted by source water. On the NASM side, we had 9 submissions come in with 3 where we added conditions around the application practices. The other 6 had the vulnerable area removed from the application area, and the one existing NASM plan was amended to remove the vulnerable area as well. For strategies, we had 8 new approvals last year that had our standard conditions added, but didn't actually need site-specific conditions. Our standard conditions are basically a way for us to say that we reviewed the strategy for source water, and as approved, it conforms to the source protection policies. We had 3 existing approvals where those also had the standard conditions being added to 2 of them. So overall, you can see that it's not a very large source water burden on nutrient management at only about 2% of approvals impacted, but it's still something that needs to be considered. Next slide, please, Matt. So I just wanted to jump over to the changes that the Clean Water Act, that MECP is proposing for the Clean Water Act and how those may impact nutrient management. So the listed changes here have been approved by MECP, but they're still working out the details of how those changes will be implemented. And once those details have been worked out, then the changes will come into effect. So the first 2 items, the Source Protection Plan amendment approval process and the use of sources of drinking water, are much more focused on the Source Protection Authority administrative side of things and don't really have anything to do with nutrient management, so I won't be talking about those ones. The last one is around prescribed instruments and does have a bearing on nutrient management, so I'll explain those in a little bit more detail on the following slides. Next. So just before we get into the specific changes, I wanted to give a quick refresher on what a prescribed instrument is and what the current state of prescribed instrument responsibility is. So we all know the 3 main documents under the nutrient management reg. Nutrient management strategy deals with generation and storage of nutrients. Nutrient management plan handles the land application of nutrients, and a NASM plan deals with the storage and application of NASM. These activities are also they're also prescribed threats that are regulated under the Clean Water Act, meaning that the strategy, nutrient management plan, and NASM plan are all defined as prescribed instruments under the Clean Water Act and must conform to the local source protection policies. So at the bottom there under OMAFA, you can see that we have approved nutrient management strategies and NASM plans, but we do not issue approvals for nutrient management. We don't issue approvals for nutrient management plans or registered NASM plans. Those are the ones where their preparer is responsible for conformity with the source protection policies. That means as the consultant/preparer, you are supposed to make sure that the nutrient management plan or registration conforms to the source protection policies. Next slide. Okay, so this prescribed instrument changes. The first one is around the management of an activity when there is a prescribed instrument on the property and how the issuer or preparer considers source water protection during review or preparation. So currently a source protection authority can specify what needs to be considered during review for source protection. Policy wording can range from, please consider terms and conditions to manage the activity, to something very prescriptive like you shall add conditions A, B, and C to the prescribed instrument. The majority of policies directed at nutrient management are more the, please consider terms and conditions type, but the prescriptive policies have created concerns and issues for other ministries. And this is why MECP is proposing to remove the ability for source protection authorities to write policies that manage an activity through a prescribed instrument. So instead, that direction would now sit in the Clean Water Act and would be standardized to reflect the general wording of ministries being able to determine what is appropriate for their prescribed instruments. So that's the first kind of proposed change. The other change is around having, sorry, still the same slide, Matt. The other change is around having two policy types to manage the same activity. Currently, a source protection plan can have a prescribed instrument policy and an RMP policy to manage the same activity on one property. So, for example, a farm may have a NASM plan and may also require a risk management plan for the application of NASM. There is a process that a landowner can go through to be exempt from needing a risk management plan if they have a prescribed instrument, but it is burdensome, I guess, and confusing and involved. So MECP is currently considering changing to the prescribed instrument being the default governing document for an activity if it exists on a property, unless the risk management official believes it does not address source water protection. And in those cases, the RMO can challenge the prescribed instrument and establish a risk management plan instead. This change needs a lot more discussion and consideration. So I guess stay tuned for any future updates there. And then finally, the two other proposed changes are more administrative in nature and not really applicable to our group. Next slide, Matt. So finally, I just wanted a quick reminder of the resources available and the steps to take to make sure that source water is addressed when needed. So first, AgMaps Mapper has all of the source water layers available to take a look at. The screenshot here is what layers are most important, specifically highlighted in green, the issue contributing areas, and then the vulnerability scoring for the WAPAs, the WAPA-Es, and the IPZs. And then the next step would be to figure out whether the vulnerability scoring is high enough for significant threat policies to apply. So for WAPAs, the score needs to be a 10. For IPZs and WAPA-Es, it's a scoring of 8 or greater. For issue contributing areas, the applicable issues are around nitrate and phosphorus concentrations and E. coli and pathogen levels. So if any of those vulnerability scores or issues are met, then there will be significant threat policies under the source protection plan that apply to that vulnerable area. And as the preparer of the strategies and plans, it's important to check the source water information to potentially save time and effort down the line. Prohibition policies are pretty straightforward. The activity just can't happen in that area. But the management of the activity through a prescribed instrument is a little bit more involved. Usually it's taking a look at the site-specific details of the property, documenting management measures that are already taking place, and proposing new measures to fill any gaps. And as always, we're always happy to talk through any situation that may come up. And that's it. That's all I have.
Hey, thanks, Brittany.
Yeah.
Any questions for Brittany? All right. I guess I can't see any questions coming up.
No, none. No questions so far came up on the chat. So I think
guess
that's
we'll
good.
Move on to Dale then, correct, for AgriSuite updates?
That's correct.
Okay,
Over to you,
thanks,
Dale.
Matt. Thanks, Matt. Well, good day and welcome to what I believe is the 23rd and what should be my penultimate consultant update. I believe the first one was in 2004, Matt. So Maya, Peter, and I have been around for 23 of them, I believe. Today, I'll be sharing some of the recent updates to AgriSuite, and if there's time at the end, I'll run through a quick demonstration of retrofitting a treatment system into one. I'm going to turn off my camera so you're not staring into my ear hole while I do the presentation, and just going to try and get my desktop organized here, Matt. I'm going to share screen 2. Let me know, Matt, when you can see the cliffside dwelling here.
Okay.
It is there.
No.
Oh, you got to share twice, Janet. You got to tell me to share twice.
I already told you twice, Dale.
No,
That should be better.
we
Is
see a
it
nice
there?
picture. We see a nice picture of your last vacation, Dale.
Yeah, something like that. Yes. Okay, so let me get things organized just a little bit more here. A number of you have been providing comments on what is and what is not working, or what could be better in AgriSuite, and I do thank you for those comments. Please keep them coming. Do understand that they may or may not get implemented in the next round of development, but we are always open to good ideas. We just had an update a couple months ago, and a few things have changed a little bit. Do you see AgriSuite, Matt?
Yes, I do.
Okay, cool. I'm going to start with cover crops. The cover crop function should be working correctly now. When a cover crop is indicated, AgriSuite now directs the nutrients to the next cropping year. So to do that, you can see in my example here, we've got a winter wheat crop, and then a cover crop that followed it with the manure application in the late summer, early fall, late summer, I guess. When you do that manure application, make sure that you indicate that a cover crop exists, and that'll push the nitrogen availability out to the late fall estimate. So if you notice that my application is providing 72 kilograms per hectare of nitrogen. If I tell it that there's a cover crop in place, that increases that, basically doubles the contribution of nitrogen by having the cover crop in place. We're going to talk about this a little bit more in the questions and answers, but I did want to point out that cover crop is working correctly now. A new thing is liming recommendations have been included into the program. So if you have a soil pH that is less than 6.1, you'll get some liming information. So if you notice on this one, my pH is 6.1. I go to my corn crop. There's nothing mentioned here about liming. But if I go to where the soil is less than 6.1 and I go to my corn crop, I get an indication that a lime recommendation is in place. And if I click on this green eye on the side, it provides me a link that takes me to the publication 811 tables about soil acidity and liming, and you can read about that there. But if you know about such things and you provide a buffer pH, when your pH is below 6.1, you put in a buffer pH. I'm just going to put in 6.1 here. Now, when I go down to my corn crop, I have a lime recommendation, and I actually have a value on the lime recommendation. And I still can go to that link if I want to read up on it and maybe fine tune that recommendation a bit, but it's providing a lime recommendation. The recommendation is based on the buffer pH, soil texture, and intended crop, and the liming material having an ag index, of 75. So for example, if I switch this to alfalfa, the liming recommendation is going to go up because alfalfa is a little bit more sensitive to pH than corn is. So the liming recommendations are now in place. Last thing I'm going to talk about as new stuff is NASM related reports, specifically the land application schedule and post-application report. So let me get that open. So when you're generating a land application schedule, post-application report, it's going to be the same for both. So I'm just going to demonstrate the land application schedule. When you generate that report, we've simplified the information here in the pick list for which application event that we're going to talk about. The title of the report is basically when, what, and where, so what farm that you're applying it to. And the application pick list is sorted by application event date and with the most recent at the top. When you actually generate the report, you notice that the title has changed to, it has the NASM plan identification number, and then that's the plan name, and then that same information from the pick list. And Matt alluded to this a little bit. When you generate the report, click on print. If you choose, and this is for PCs, I'm not really sure what happens with the Mac products, but with PCs, if you choose save as PDF from your list of destinations, choose save as PDF. You will get a much more legible file. It'll be a much smaller file, and the print quality will be much better. Also, make sure you have headers and footers toggled on. That makes sure that it prints the title across the top and some information across the bottom. If you don't have that turned on, the titles don't show up, so you don't know what file you're working with if you have a big stack of paper or whatever. So make sure the headers and footers are turned on. Now, this title can get very long. Sometimes there's a lot of information here. I'm not really sure what to take out of it, but that's what ends up in it. We're open to suggestions on what would be better, content and order, but that's what we get.
What a good boy.
Well, thank you, Danielle.
Sorry, I'm talking to the dog. I didn't realize I was off mute.
I'll take the compliment. It's fine.
Actually,
And
Dale, while we're talking about this, just for like the headers and footers, I submitted 6 plans to Shannon the other day all for the same farmer. And when I got the approval, like not the approval, the acknowledgement back, they don't reference which plan. Like, is there a way to stick that information in there?
yeah, I'm sure we'll be able to do something. Might not be right away, and our system has been hiccuping just a little bit lately.
Okay.
So, yeah, so NASM plan number in acknowledgement.
Yes. Well, the name of what I submitted, like it was all for the same farmer, 6 different farms, and then I get back 6 acknowledgements of just saying like farmer A, thank you for your submission.
Yeah,
But
okay.
it doesn't reference the farm name.
Yeah, let's take this off to the side, Danielle.
Perfect.
And we'll see if we
Sorry,
can get that better.
I didn't realize my mute button was off. I switched to my audio. Sorry, Dale.
As long as you send me a treat as well as call me a good boy, it'll be fine.
Liver treats.
No, thank you.
Thanks, Dale.
Yeah, where are we at now? You've got me all discombobulated. When you hit, yeah, make sure your headers and footers are on so that you have the title across the top. And when you hit save, that name is the suggested file save name. And when you open the PDF, there'll be more information in the tab than just AgriSuite when you open up the document. That's about it for new stuff. Are there any questions that anybody has about the new stuff? Anything I've talked about?
Dale, there was a question in the chat. Can the ag index for the liming material be changed from 75 for materials with a lower or higher ag index?
Uh, I'm going to say probably. That is, we got the lime in and working. It could be fine-tuned a lot, so we'll take that as a suggestion. Whoever had that question, just send that to me in an email if you don't mind, and I'll pass that on to see if we can get that incorporated in a later build. Any more there, Janet?
There are no more in the chat.
Okay.
Oh,
Well, I'm going to
somebody,
start on with, oh, go ahead.
just wait 1 second. Now there is one. Just doing another plan today. The processing speed is still painfully slow. So slow, in fact, that a progress bar would be more fitting than the pinwheel of death. So just
Okay.
a winky face on that from Cleon.
Oh, Cleon's incensed again, is he? Okay. Yeah, when you are having issues like that, again, constructive criticism is more than welcome. Let us know um, what's taking a long time, what you're trying to do. Okay. Send the email to me. I can pass it on to the development team. Okay.
Okay, you can continue.
All right. So I'm gonna run through an example that I had to explain a surprising number of times this year. There's a lot of um, regulated mixed anaerobic digestion facilities being retrofitted into existing operations, which is really quite neat. And it's can be a challenge to represent in AgriSuite. So I've come up with a way to do it. It's probably not the only way, but I just want to give a quick demonstration now, and people can think about it. And if they're doing a digester in a system, um, maybe refer to this or give me a shout and we'll talk it through. Um, so when you're modeling a digester, really any treatment system, it doesn't really matter which treatment system you're using, but you follow the path of the manure. You figure out how it gets from the animal to the digester or to the treatment system, in this case, digester. Figure out how it gets from the animal to the digester. And several examples that we talked about this past year, um, the producer couldn't understand why they didn't have underbarn storage anymore. But really, the the underbarn storage is now more or less just a collection system. In this one that I've drawn, there are other ways to get around it, I'm sure. But the ones that we were talking about, it was they had an underground storage. The manure moved from that storage to the digester, and then they thought they could just fire the digestate back in under the barn. And there's a number of reasons that doesn't work. Anyway, so figure out how the manure gets from the animal to the digester, and then figure out what gets stored, how long it gets stored, for how long it gets stored, and is there a limit to how much can be stored? So a lot of these digester systems have off-farm material, and there's a maximum to the amount of material that you can store at any one time under a nutrient management strategy. So just think about things like that, and think about whether it's on-farm material, things coming from the farm, like an energy crop into the digester. Is it off-farm material that there's a limit for? And digestate. This is where you need your minimum storage requirement, is for the material coming out of the digester. Materials can't go backwards. Manure rarely flows uphill unless there's a great deal of it. So you need to make sure that you're following the path of the material and where it's going to end up. And you may need to be ready to discuss the logistics of how the digestate's going to be stored. So if I can, I'm going to open up AgriSuite again. Sorry, I didn't mean to close it, but I did. So this system I modeled really as three storage systems, and really two of them are collection systems, and one of them is a treatment system. And so in this one, I started with the animals. So the beef system, I started with the animals. I added some beef feeders in this one. They were on a slatted floor, so it's all liquid manure. And because it's manure will move to the digester every day, I didn't bother adding a storage in here. I just put in a transfer out to the digester. So it's a on or within farm unit transfer that will go to the digester. Then I put in the off-farm material, and I described it as good as I could. Schedule 1 off-farm material, Schedule 2 off-farm material. There's different requirements for both of them, but there are limits on how much you can take and how much you can have at one time. It makes sense that you'll take as much as you can. Shoot, I bounced over a spot. Have to back up a little bit. So in the beef system, there's some information from here that you're going to need to know for later, and I'll pull it out of the little information button. The one that I would want to know is the average daily amount, the amount of manure that's going to be produced every day, and the number of nutrient units. So the amount produced every day and the number of nutrient units is displayed somewhere that I'm just not finding here right now, right here, 167. So the off-farm materials, you're going to want to, if possible, you're going to take as much as you can. And in a regulated mixed anaerobic digester, the off-farm material, there has to be at least half on-farm material, at least in this example, half of it has to be manure, the other half can be off-farm material. So for these ones, I just transferred in um, 7 cubic meters a day, which is about half of what the manure was being generated. So together, that's 50%. In my example, I also sized the storage tank to be just under the maximum that it can be. You can have a maximum of 200 cubic meters at any one time. So I sized the tank to be 190, and at some point you'll need to show somebody that. So I did that, and then I did an within farm unit transfer to transfer that material out so it can now go to the digester. And then finally, I added the treatment system. Add within farm unit incoming transfers of manure and of off-farm material, and then add the treatments in the order that they occur. It doesn't matter what treatment system you're doing, just put them in the order that they occur. This one's only got the anaerobic digester, so I added that in. It wants to know how many nutrient units of manure are going into it, so you fill that in that field there. Select your input materials, and our literature says you can convert about 40% of the solid fraction to biogas, and that's a fairly accepted industry number, so you can put that in there. And then you need to store the material. And so I've put in a storage, and I've sized it to be just big enough. I actually have just 240 days worth of storage, and then you can land apply or transfer out the material just the same as you would with manure in any strategy. So the report that you generate the nutrient management strategy. And I believe I have a printout of it. And it should have the important information indicated. So total amount of nutrient units in the beef system there. How much manure is being generated. The off-farm material says your total storage capacity is 190 cubic meters. The recipe going into the regulated mixed anaerobic digestion facility has to be at least 50% on-farm material. That will show up in this box. How much of that is manure will show up in this box, and then shows your amount of material that's going to be generated. Your actual storage capacity will be shown there. And then at the very end, it shows how much of it's being land applied. And just for simplicity, I transferred it all out to other operations. So I know that's been really quick, but I have had to demonstrate that to a number of people this year. Not that it's a problem. Just thought it might be interesting for this venue. Any questions on that? Anything come up in the chat, Janet?
Nothing in the chat that I've seen.
Awesome. Okay, that ended the lesson, Matt.
Awesome. Thanks, Dale. Janet, we're going to housing capacity next. Is that the agenda? That was a
Yes.
question, but okay.
Yeah,
No,
sorry, I was on mute. Sorry, yes,
No
it's
problem.
guidance
No
on
problem.
housing capacity.
All right. I'll share my screen again. Sharing screen. Perfect. Okay, so we just wanted to provide a bit more information on housing capacity. It's one of the questions that comes up fairly often, and just want to provide some more information on what we're looking for with housing capacity. So when we're talking about nutrient management strategies, the guidance we're given is in the nutrient management protocol 5.2.2, and it's under the section determination of manure generated. So it says there, for new buildings or structures used to house farm animals or existing livestock housing facilities that are being expanded, the number of farm animals must be equal to or greater than the number determined using the livestock housing capacity value provided in table 1. Or documentation must be included indicating why the maximum housing capacity of the barn is different than the livestock housing capacity value. Documentation must include barn schematics, a barn layout sketch, or written description of the reason for this difference. So I'll give you my next slide here. So when we're looking at a nutrient management strategy, when it's talking about the livestock housing capacity value, AgriSuite gives us that. That's the estimated estimated livestock barn area in AgriSuite. So when we're doing our review of this information, what we're doing is looking at, and this is a simple dairy example, we're looking at the livestock that's been entered into AgriSuite. We're simply adding up the estimated barn area, and if you looked at that, we're given a number of 12,180 feet squared. We then normally have to have a farmstead sketch, and sometimes all we get is this farmstead sketch giving us, proposed dairy barn 205 by 100. If that's all we're given, the area that we know is 20,500, which is significantly different than what we're looking for in the from the AgriSuite information. That's why we're asking for more information. I always say we're looking for not just a rectangle, we're looking for information inside the rectangle. So in this case, nice schematic was provided telling us that there's 100 total free stalls, and that makes sense by the bred heifers that are in free stalls, plus the milking cows. Shows us a nice area where the dry cow pens are, shows down here where the calf areas are. Very quickly, I can see that the numbers used in AgriSuite make perfect sense. And yes, the livestock housing capacity numbers, if that's all I had, that doesn't quite work, but I've got that additional information to know that the numbers are at maximum housing capacity. We've had all kinds of examples where numbers are way off. You ask the question, why is it only 60 cows, and wow, that's all the quota they have, and they don't think they're going to get more quota, but they're going to build for 80. The answer is the barn has to be sized for 80, enough manure storage for those 80 cows. That's the capacity of the barn, not the quota that they hold. Nothing new, just a reminder, because this still does come up fairly often. When we're asking for those barn schematics, again, this is the Cadillac of what we're looking for. Very neat, very tidy, very clear how this information from AgriSuite and the information in the sketch, I can clearly see that the shape of the barn is the same, the dimensions are the same, and the livestock numbers fit nicely in this barn. I can accept this, no problem. Sometimes we get other versions of sketches, and you can see sometimes they're perfectly fine. This one is a hand-drawn sketch, which is fine, gives us the information we need. Beef pen gives me the dimensions, and as long as the housing capacity fits in those beef pens, that's what I'm looking for. Other times, you ask for a barn schematic and you get something that looks like this, and that's really not helpful. I have no idea what's this is showing me. I need dimensions, or how many cattle can fit in here. This is just not helpful. Another couple of examples. This is a sketch that we have gotten in. That's what we're talking about when we have illegible things that again, not useful. I'm not going to guess what those numbers are. You need to give us something that we can read. And then another nice example here, very clear dimensions. Pack area is laid out, showing us where things that are not livestock housing are there. Again, very good sketch that we can easily cross-reference and make sure we got the information we need. So that's just a bit more information on those barn schematics that we're asking for. And we are asking for them fairly regularly. Definitely if you've got a dairy barn, we're probably going to be asking for one. Broiler barns are usually not, because that housing capacity number usually is pretty close. Hog finishing barns, normally it's pretty close. But anytime you've got something that makes the information this much clearer, highly suggest that you include it with your submission. So we don't have to come back to you and ask you for it. So with that, I think if there's no questions, I will pass it over. I got Steve, I got your stuff up next. And just a couple notes on MDS versus nutrient management. Again, this is not new. It's two separate evaluations of that facility. As you saw in the protocol, the reason we're estimating or calculating maximum housing capacity in a strategy is to figure out how much manure is being produced and making sure we have enough manure storage. The reason for MDS is those odor setbacks. The numbers should be very, very close, if not the same, but it is two different assessments, right? So we're looking at the nutrient management information. The building official is looking at it from the MDS lens, and they may very well ask you for different information or question those numbers, and that's definitely within their prerogative for sure. Just because we approved a strategy does not mean those numbers have to be used in MDS. It's you can't say I have an approval from OMAFA. Those numbers have to be used in MDS. That is definitely not how it works. So with that, I'll send it over to you, Steve, and I can flip through your slides for you.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. Like Brittany, I am in a field office and I'm not turning on my camera. You won't hear me. So apparently I'm fancy enough to have a title page. So hi to those of you I have not met. I'm Steve Beadle. I am in a separate unit than the people you've heard from so far today. I'm in the engineering unit. And I'm one of the livestock engineers. I deal with sheep and swine industries. And in a few minutes, you'll hear from my colleague Dan Ward, who deals with the poultry industries. So if you want to skip to the next slide there, Matt. So these are a couple of things that I have been involved in over the last year or two, things that have come up, whether it's come to me from our approvals folks like Matt, Brittany, or perhaps I've been contacted by a municipal person regarding MDS. Maybe I've had a call from one of you. Maybe I've had a call from a farmer. So this is some things that I've noticed. And one of those things has to do with finisher facilities for swine. And it usually comes when there is a certified certified humane or some sort of organic production that'll have larger space requirements per head than conventional finisher facilities. Totally understand that it happens, and that's great. So they will have a larger space allowance per pig than a conventional facility. It will depend on what system it is. Is it certified humane? Is it organic? Who is it with? Who are the pigs getting sold to? Because there's a lot of different systems out there. Those types of information would be great to have for our reference. Sometimes have a hard time getting those, but that was just a plug for me. But when it comes down to I guess I'll talk about the nutrient management strategy and the MDS2 calculations. So as Matt pointed out earlier with the protocols, it is the capacity of the barn based on the area that AgriSuite calculates from the values in table 1, unless you show a good reason why it is less than that. So in this example, you would likely have a good reason to have more space per pig, so a smaller number of animals in a given area of barn, to be able to use that number for nutrient management. So I have an example here, 1,000 head certified humane finishing facility. They're going to use 20 square feet per pig on solid floors based on the system they're in and their buyer requirements. So we've got a 20,000 square foot barn with floor plan, with some additional information in the submission. Likely we could do that nutrient management strategy based on 1,000 head, and that's great. Off we go. When it comes to MDS2, the MDS2 guidelines are clear that the calculations for MDS2 are done based on the design capacity of the barn, and that affects factor B in the calculation. In this type of an example with finisher facilities, I could, 4 years from now, go, oh, you know what? I'm just not happy doing certified humane production. I am going to go back to conventional construction or conventional production. I have a solid floor barn. I can just increase my head and go to conventional construction. At that stage, we want that barn to still be far enough away from neighbors and other sensitive receptors for odor. So it would be my suggestion that MDS2 would be completed in this case for 1,247 head in that 20,000 square foot of solid floor barn based on the numbers in AgriSuite. Matt, you'll flip to the next slide there for me, please. So this is an example of that I use the MDS tool for this, but I'm going to size or use my MDS design capacity. To get that, I can use the little green square next to existing number or new number, depending on whether it's a new barn or not, and put in the 20,000 square feet, and it'll tell me it's 1,247 of those feeders on deep bedded packs. So that was my suggestion on how it should be done. That meets the design capacity requirements in MDS, but also looks at nutrient management, saying there are other systems out there that we can accommodate. So that was the first example. Matt, if you want to go to the next slide. The next two things are to do with sow facilities. So the first one is to do with the sow population and space allowances. We've had a number of new sow facility submissions come in. Most of the time, things are looking great. Everything kind of adds up. There are times when a producer would like to offer additional space for gestating sows, or perhaps they want to use a larger farrowing crate. And when I say larger, that would be more than standard production. So no problem, that's fine. The fact of the matter is that the number of farrowing spaces in that barn really is the key number. So I honestly don't care how many sows you have in the barn. You're making money off of your farrowing spaces because that's the only place the sows do their job. You can waste your money on feeding a bunch of sows that you don't put through the farrowing facility or through the farrowing rooms, but the number of farrowing spaces is the key, and that number can be back calculated to get an idea of total sow population in the barn. Then you look at the sow or the space allowances that are being proposed and say, is this reasonable or not? We can also look at the stock numbers from table 1 that are given in AgriSuite and can do some comparisons there as well. So when you submit something for a new sow barn or a renovated sow barn, you may get us asking those questions. We may ask for some additional information, like Matt already said, a floor plan, maybe some production information or proposed production information for things like total number of farrowing spaces that are proposed, what's the average weaning age of those piglets, and what is the farrowing interval? How often do sows get put into farrowing? That using that information, we can get a much better handle on total population and make the call there. When we account for average numbers, how many farrowing spaces versus sow population in normal conventional sow or piglet production through sows, and using the numbers from table 1, the average space is about 38 square foot per sow total for the whole facility. That counts also for the empty space that practically you need in that barn so that you can move sows from farrowing to breeding to gestation back to farrowing. So there's always going to be a little bit of empty space. We are aware that the MDS2 software only uses 30 square foot per sow. So it's not giving us the right number and has at least caused one problem thus far that we've resolved. So that is on the list. Hopefully we can get that updated in the software soon. Next slide, Matt. So this is just an example. It's a clip from a spreadsheet that we have. You can put in how many farrowing spaces, a little bit of production data in the yellow boxes there, and it'll pump out how big's your sow population and how many spaces you have in the barn on the average. So it's just a tool that we use to look at the numbers that we receive and say, is this good? Is this reasonable? Or is there something a little off? I think I've got two more slides, I guess. Nope, one more slide. Sow facilities when it comes to changing to loose sow housing. Again, farrowing spaces is the number that really drives everything. Some producers, as they decide to, let's say, renovate or replace their farrowing rooms, as it's usually the part of a sow barn that takes the biggest beating. They'll put on new farrowing facilities and convert the old ones into loose sow housing, as is required through the National Farm Animal Care Council guidelines. So sometimes that does mean the overall barn size is bigger for the same number of sows. Okay. It really depends on what you're starting with as to whether that is true or not. The guidelines list gestating sow space requirements per head of 19 to 24 square foot. Sometimes producers want a little more space for various management reasons. Maybe the farrowing rooms have they're done. They need replacing, so I'm going to add an addition on and change things around a bit. So you will run into situations where the sow population of the barn does not increase, but the footprint does. So for, again, nutrient management strategies, we will be looking at those table 1 values that AgriSuite calculates for barn area, estimated barn area. Of course, if producers allowing additional space in gestation, or let's say they're putting in new farrowing pens and they're much bigger than the old ones as times have changed, with appropriate documentation, that's okay too. We can do that. When it comes down to the MDS2 calculation, when you're entering that into AgriSuite, under the existing maximum number, let's say we're talking about 1,000 sow barn, you'd put in 1,000 sows in the existing number. You'd put 1,000 sows in the total maximum number after the alteration. You're adding an addition but not changing the sow numbers. It will calculate you a setback distance, and that setback distance would be to the new construction, just like MDS always treats additions. And that was how you would apply that in the MDS2 realm. More information on that can be found in Implementation Guideline 40. I will stop there. Are there any questions before Dan continues on with feather stuff?
Nothing in the chat.
Away, Dan. Well, it's all yours, Dan.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Dan Ward here. As Steve alluded, I've got the poultry file. I guess I'm also one of the leads on MDS. So I guess they're two separate things at the moment, or two separate evaluations, but there is some overlap in some of these things. Layer housing barn capacity verification. This has come up more frequently in the last year and a half than I think I can remember in the last 15 years. This is being driven by a couple things. So the egg sector has seen adoption of more enriched cages and aviary housing. Some of that is market driven. Some of it goes to the layer and pullet code of practice. So the current version of those was released in 2017, and it's one of these industry voluntary documents. The one thing that's unique about the layer one, they've got specific dates in there when this sector is supposed to be transitioned from conventional battery cages going forward. The date sounded pretty ambitious back in 2017, but we are rapidly moving towards it. So by 2031, July 1st, 2031, it's highlighted here, each of those hens still kept in conventional cages. I guess what's going to happen is they're going to have to reduce the stocking density in the cage. You're going to have to give each hen more space than what they were allowed previously. So that's one thing that's coming. And I guess, we're seeing, like I said, the market is also asking for more free run, free range, free whatever type housing. So that's also putting some of the pressure on to change. Most of these cage systems typically have a lifespan of between 20 and 30 years. I'd say it'd be a fair number. And we have quite a few of those that are probably getting close to the end of their life. And the other thing right now, I think that's driving a lot of this, most of our cage equipment is coming from Europe. There's not a lot of it manufactured in Canada. Most of the systems that are commercially sold come from overseas. And there seems to be a real demand right now, talking to some of the equipment suppliers. If you order today, you might see the equipment in something like 18 months. I know we're looking at this with the University of Guelph build, and so there's demand around the world on the layer side. So there's a lot of farmers I think are planning ahead, and there's definitely some interest in switching systems. If they are, the new requirements, like it's highlighted there as well, all hens housed in enriched or non-cage housing systems will meet the code requirements by July 1st, 2036. Please jump ahead to the next slide. So your enriched cages, I guess the difference between these and your conventional battery cages, most of these are larger groups. In our old battery cages, the groupings were anywhere from, I'm going to say 3 to 7 hens in a cage. There was no enrichment, so basically it was just a cage with the feeder on the front and the water nipple in the back. As part of the enriched, they're supposed to have some perching in there, some scratch areas. The groups are larger, so the hens can move around more, and there's usually a nesting area with curtains, as shown here, these yellow curtains hanging down. Basically, the hens are able to express themselves a little better and move around, and they don't. In these systems, the hens do not have access to the floor, so they're still in a cage system. It's just a bigger unit, and they're allowed. You'll see them moving around quite a bit more than in the old battery cages. Next slide, please, Matt. Okay, so I guess for determining the housing capacity, and unlike most of the other livestock species in AgriSuite, we never have provided an estimated barn area for layer hens, simply because it was contingent on the type of equipment being used, whether there was 3 rows of cages, 4 tiers high, or 3 rows of cages, 2-tier high. The same size building could have quite significant differences in livestock in housing capacity. So basically it comes back to the equipment, and what we've been using, I guess what I've been using and what we've been referring the approvals folks to when I get a call on one of these. So the second highlighted section here, this is right out of the code of practice. For enriched cages, each hen must be provided with a minimum of 750 square centimeters or 116.25 square inches of space. That includes the nesting area. So that is the actual cage floor area. That's not the width to the outside of the feed hoppers or the egg belts or any of that. It's the actual floor area that the hen can walk on. So next slide, please, Matt. Oh, no, back one. Okay, so I guess if you are doing a layer facility with enriched cages, I guess this is the type of information you should be providing to approvals, or they're going to be asking for it. So, first of all, how many cage rows in the barn? So if the barn is 60 by 300 feet long with a 10-foot or a 14-foot sidewall, that's fine, but it's just a box. I guess we'd want to know that there's 4 rows of cages in there, and they're 3 tiers high. And if you can provide a cross-section view of the cage, showing the width dimension of the actual floor, not, like I said, not including the feed trough and the egg belts on the front of it, that will help to figure out the width of the thing. And then if you have an overhead view of the cage row, the dimensions showing the actual bird housing area. So typically with layer equipment, there's wasted space at each end of the cage row where there's no birds. So the end with the egg elevators and the motors for the feed hoppers, there's typically 12 to 14, 16 feet that's taken up for that. On the opposite end where the manure belts come off, there's usually space for the tensioners and the motors and stuff. So any of that area it's not considered it's not actual bird housing. Yes, it's part of the row, but it won't determine how many birds are in the actual row. So you can either do the steps 1, 2, 3, and 4, or if you know, like step 5 is basically the simpler, or not simpler, but if the farmer is planning to install a particular model, so if it's a Hellman model 25X dot whatever, something like that we can verify that the size of the cage. And then if you say each row will have 24 sections of these, it's quite easy to verify the bird numbers and say, yeah, that makes sense. Each particular cage is going to hold 25 birds. There's 24 sections of these in a row, and they're 4 deep. it's quite easy. And there's 4 rows total in the barn. It's very easy to come up with the total bird numbers that are going to be housed in that system. Okay, so moving on, next slide, please, Matt. So the other one we're seeing is aviaries. And so these ones are these multi-tier systems where the hens are free to move up and down through the system, and they have access to the floors. So there's typically scratch areas. Some of them will have access underneath the equipment. Some of them, they're excluded. They're fenced out of the underneath part. You know, there's feed and water provided on various sections through the system. Usually the feed's on one level and the nest boxes or nesting areas are on another. There could be water lines on all. These nest boxes are within the equipment, and they usually have an open and close function. So to prevent the birds from becoming broody and dirtying the nests, you know, the nests are only open typically in the morning when the lights come on. They're open for a period of time, and then there's usually a closing mechanism that'll push the birds out after a period of time to keep the nest clean. So anyways, long story short, we'll jump to the next slide. I guess as far as how you evaluate the capacity in these, so typically they've got similar capacity to a cage system, except there's no fronts on these things. The easiest way I've come up with for estimating the bird numbers is the highlighted part there where it talks about each hen must be provided with nest space area at a minimum of 83 centimeters or 12.9 square inches. So usually, if we can go ahead one more slide, Matt. Sorry, one more again, please, then we'll come back. Typically, you'll get a cross section like this showing the nest boxes or the nesting area. So those bluey green areas are the nests. If there's dimensions on there showing the width of these things, and we know the length of the cage row, it's quite easy to figure out the nesting. There is another space allowance that you can verify, but you include all the areas, whether it's perches and floors and have the access to the actual floor. This is much simpler. So this is what I've been using. So if we go back one slide. Once again, if you're doing an aviary barn, so the birds have access to the floor, whether they have ramps or not going down to the floor, but they do have access to the floor. Each of those blocks of equipment is an equipment row similar to a cage row. So how many rows are in the barn? So once again, if you have a box that's 60 by 300, how many rows are in there of this equipment? Is there 3 rows? Is there 4 rows? If you have a cross-section view like we just showed of the equipment, showing the number and location size of the nest box within the equipment, that will be helpful. And then an overall length of that equipment. And it's easy to calculate the area of nest box available. Once again, if we go to the bottom, it should be step 4, but if you have an actual supplier, so if the farmer knows that he's buying once again, I'll say Hellman, but it could be one of the other ones, model number, whatever, aviary with 2 continuous nest box, 2 continuous mechanical nest boxes located within each equipment row. And you know that the nest box is X by Y long. It's quite easy to do it that way. You don't have to show as many drawings, but that's the kind of information that's needed in order to come up with a bird number. It's very contingent on the equipment. Some of these systems are quite a bit bigger than others. And it's impossible looking at the outside of the building to come up with an estimate of birds without getting into the actual equipment. Next slide, please, Matt. I think this might be the last one I had. One more, please. Okay, that's all I had for the layers.
Awesome, thanks, Dan. Any questions for Steve or Dan? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, and we do have a time at the end for questions and answers, so still another chance to ask some questions. We'll move over to MECP next. I believe, Tom, you'll go first.
Yep, I'm right here.
There you are.
All right, going to attempt the Zoom share here. Okay, can I get a beat on how that looks? Am I sharing the
Yep.
screen?
You've got it. Yep, perfect, Tom.
Excellent. Well, thanks everyone for having me. Appreciate being here. So those of you who don't know me, my name is Tom Cowan. I am the program specialist acting for the agriculture program here at MECP in the new modern regulator branch. Just some background on sort of where I come from. I've been working with the ministry now for approximately 18 years. Most of that has been spent in the pesticide program, working in the pesticide compliance area as the program specialist or pesticide specialist out of the London office. I did some time in the Toronto office as well. I did work for OMAFA for a season as a field crop entomologist, so I do have a lot of background in the ag sector, not necessarily in the nutrient management section right now, but that's one thing I'm kind of picking up as we go along. Before this, I did spend some time in the nursery crop industry. So my first job out of university was for White Rose Nurseries back in the day when they were still operating. And I was their plant health scientist. I also did a lot of greenhouse work and did integrated pest management programs in greenhouses. So I do have a lot of experience in the ag world from my work done in pest management. But today we are going to talk a little bit about the compliance side of the nutrient management program and the agriculture program here at MECP. Just going to give a quick overview here of what we're going to be doing, looking at the summary of our planned agricultural compliance inspections for this last fiscal year. Sorry, I'm just going to try and turn my camera off here. It's sort of getting in my way. There we go. Perfect. Yeah, so we'll do a summary of the planned agricultural compliance activities for last fiscal, and then we'll look a little bit at the responsive events that were done as well in that same year. So for our planned compliance activities, they're primarily conducted through field visits. We did do some desk audits as the year went by, and responsive events, those are generally limited to high-risk incidents. So for example, spills or incidents that occur that require us to look at impacts that might occur. Either they are impending or could cause an environmental impact or human health impact, or they already have, i.e. spills or runoff or something like that. All right, so just going to walk through some of the planned agricultural compliance activities for the last fiscal. And these outcomes are focused mainly on addressing actual or implementing impacts. So the assessment doesn't really focus on a detailed audits of administrative requirements. So some of those administrative requirements are included in the inspection, but typically we're going to look at the components of interest. So things like storages, like NASM storages, either temporary or permanent, livestock areas, dead stock areas, fields. This will include NASM application areas and the NASM plan. And typically when the environmental compliance officers go out, they're looking to define the inspection by those components of interest. So for example, if you have livestock areas or dead stock areas, those are the areas of focus of the inspection. If you're running a NASM plan, then they'll look at that as well. Okay, so a total of 193 planned agricultural inspections were completed, and 58 of those which we have addressed NASM or management of NASM. So these are primarily done through field visits. So the agricultural officers will go out and do the field visit to do the inspection on these areas. They'll include a NASM plan assessment and the assessment of land applications, so those activities at the farm site. Some of those will include NASM, and then you'll get other stuff that happens like ASM applications on that farm unit as well as a storage assessment if a storage unit is on the area. Here's some graphical information of what we're finding now. What's interesting in this is I've had a look back through a few of the other presentations from the other years. The inspection outcomes remain relatively similar. This year, we had 74% of the inspections appeared to be in compliance. 26% were not. I think last year it was 60-40, 60 in compliance, 40 not in compliance, around those numbers. Breaking that down a little bit more, majority of issues we found were with the field sketch, and I'm just kind of harking back to Matt's presentation about providing sketches for plans and for and strategies. And I think the same thing sort of applies here. We're looking to see whether that field sketch matches what is actually in reality. Sometimes they're not. We're looking at other things. We see like sample analysis was one that came up, storage, annual reviews, requirements being explained. And just on the next slide, I'm just going to go into these a little bit more detail. So when I went through some of the inspection reports, just sort of looking around what we're finding in those field sketches, typically it looks like things like this. Wells weren't on there that should have been. Surface water wasn't indicated. Tile inlets weren't provided. Dwellings were missing from the sketches as well. So those are the things that we sort of, the officers saw and reported in their reports. Under the sample analysis, what I found is a few instances where samples were not taken prior to the transfer of a NASM, or there's inconsistent sampling identification. So for example, you've got a sample being taken from one location, but it's given a different identification when it's submitted to the lab, right? So I can't track those two samples, so they might not match up. So those are things to keep in mind and be careful of. Application schedules, again, not being provided to the owner of the land. Annual reviews, so NASM plans were not updated, and the annual review maybe not be provided. Storages, incorrect distances provided to surface waters as part of the plan, and just other stuff we saw, like nutrient sources not listed, and expired NASM plans were found, and then just a few other issues that were just about writing and administrative options. Okay. So as far as I could find, in our notes, all these violations have been resolved and done through voluntary compliance. So that's where the environmental officer will work with the farmer to determine how best to address the issue and to come to a resolution. And typically in these cases, they're given a plan to follow and dates or things to do by certain dates, and they will complete those. And once those are done, the issue is considered resolved. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the responsive activities for the last fiscal, and these are a little interesting. So looking at 250 agricultural events that were reported, 162 of these events were related to nutrient management. Now, the thing to notice about responsive events is these are just phone calls or information that we get that come into the various district offices, and they can be many different things. So for example, if we're looking at agricultural events, we're looking at things that may have been included like pesticide applications or spray drift or dust or a whole bunch of other incidents that may be included in some of those. So nutrient management incidents would be a subsect of that, which is we're looking at about 162 incidents. So I pulled out a few, just some interesting things that have been noted in previous presentations. So 6 of these events we found were due to winter spreading. 21 of those were linked to spills, and that's typically manure spills. 18 incidents were linked to nutrient storage activities. So that's like NASM storage or ASM storage or on-farm storage. And about 117 incidents were not defined with those, so those are just various other issues. In these situations, as far as I could tell from the data we have, they were all addressed through voluntary compliance. And the other thing to note with these particular incidents is most of them are done through what we refer to as desktop audits. So when the calls come in, the officer can decide whether they will respond either as a field response or as a desktop audit, just explaining or providing information over the phone and managing it that way. Again, like I mentioned before, most of those field responses are done for more emergency issues. So for example, if there's a potential or immediate impact to the environment, that's when they would go out and do the inspections. And just in general, the agricultural response that we find just by material type, I just separated it up into what I found here. So the majority of the materials that were involved in any kind of responses were, I didn't split those two up. Biosolids were about 15% of those, and I separated those from what we refer to as NASM, just because the biosolids typically were involved in odor complaints. So pelletized biosolids typically were the ones that we would get an odor complaint about. Manure as well, a lot of odor complaints related to manure, and even just a lot of complaints about people seeing manure being applied and just having concerns about the application. And then dead stock takes up about 14% of those complaints. Okay, and that's just a quick outline of sort of what we found in our in the inspections for that last fiscal. My contact information here is listed. If you want to take a screenshot of that, it's also going to be on the recording as well. If you have any questions related to the information we have here, I'm happy to answer them. If I don't have the information right at the tip of my tongue or by my fingers, I will definitely look into it for you as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Tom. I don't see any questions in the chat. So with that, I think we'll move over to Travis.
Sounds good, Matt. I'm just going to share my screen here. All right. Are you seeing what you need to see there?
Yeah, we see the presentation. Yeah, in presentation mode now. Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. It sounds good. So for those of you who don't know me, Travis Burns, I'm an environmental officer at the Guelph District Office. I'm sure I've run into a few of you on the call or talked to you on the phone. So I'm going to give kind of the common issues we see with both strategies and NASM plans from the MECP perspective. So there's some certain things on the strategies that the approvers will be able to catch. I mean, like a missed barn, that kind of stuff. But there are certain things that are difficult for the approvers to notice. And so that things like, where a well is, you won't be able to see that on aerial photography. And sometimes the well records aren't accurate enough. So I'm just going to go through some of those and hopefully we can address some of those in the future. So by far, the things that I encounter more in the field is issues with wells. So, it might say on the strategy that the well will be located, 25 meters from the barn, but then between when the approval is granted and when the well is actually drilled, it gets plunked 5 meters from the barn or the storage, which does cause us a lot of concerns. I've had that exact situation happen, and it's a very costly fix. So ensuring that your clients know that when you say it's going to be a certain distance away, that they have to still adhere to that. One of the other issues that we see is wells being misidentified. So the wells in the reg are pretty clear cut, in my opinion. Essentially, it's a drilled well or an other well, and if it's not drilled, then it's likely other. One of the ones we tend to we tend to have issues with is whether a drilled well is in a well pit, and that does not qualify to be called a drilled well. We've had issues with that in the past and have had our legal department confirm that it does not meet the definition of a drilled well. So if you have a scenario like you see there in the bottom right of my screen, that would be considered an other well. Odor setbacks is another one. This is more common with NASM. So for the NASM people on the call, we can have multiple different NASM odor categories on the same plan. So you could have an OC1, OC2, and OC3 all on the plan. The issue that we see is people, rightfully so, want to get it approved with the lowest odor setback. But when it comes time to land apply, they don't implement say you get it approved with an OC1, but then when you go to actually get it, where you go to do the spreading, you choose one of the OC3s that was approved on your NASM plan, and you've got to make sure that you're implementing the correct setbacks at the time of spreading. So the land application schedule does a very good job. When you actually choose which NASM you're going to be using in the LAS, it does tell you this summary on the land application, the minimum setback summary page in the LAS. And if that isn't what you want to look at, you're also welcome to look at section 47 of OREG 267. That's one of the tables there that goes through that stuff. One of the other issues that I encountered more this year in 2025 was depth to groundwater. Ensuring that you measure the depth to groundwater when spreading NASM. You have to. Oh, sorry, somebody asking a question? Nope. All right then. Spreading NASM, you do have to check that as conditions can change during the application. So there might be, you might dig your hole and check your depth and make sure that there's no water in there, but then you might be there for a week or two depending on the NASM source, and during that time conditions can change, and that's what did happen in this scenario that you can see the pictures of. The hole was dry when they dug it. It was not dry later. So those things have to be checked every day, and depending, maybe even more than that. So again, you have to that's your responsibility as the applicator to do that kind of thing. Again, there is a NASM depth unsaturated soil within a land application schedule in the summary, but if you don't want to do that, there is further information in section 48 and 49 of the reg. Slope, one of the more complex ones that we have to deal with, that the approvers, and again, this comes back more to NASM, that the approvers at OMAFA are not able to really confirm. So you have to, during your field inspection, do a decent job on this. You do have to make sure that the slope meets the definition of maximum sustained slope. I don't have it up on here, but it is in the definitions of the reg. So make sure that it's meeting the definition. And as far as I'm aware, most of the environmental officers have the tool you'll see in the upper right side of your screen, the clinometer. Very common tool that we use. They're also available to you if you're doing those site inspections. I'm currently working with OMAFA to develop a LiDAR derived slope tool, which will help you to determine slope in the field, but it should not ever be as a replacement for field verification. Surface water, everybody's favorite. Given its wide range, surface water was given its own section in the reg just to define it outside of the actual definitions because it's so complex. The way I always like to do it is I tend to get these calls, and there tends to be a lot of hemming and hawing. Is this surface water? And if you're calling me and you're asking that, I can't make that determination from my desk. But if you have to call and make that call, it's more than likely, in my opinion, surface water. There always could be a disagreement, but the thing I always say, especially when I'm face to face with you in the field, is you are the one that if this goes poorly, you're going to be the one that's standing in front of a justice of the peace, and you're going to have to defend your position about why it is or is not surface water. So just something to consider when you're putting these plans together. Some of the other things that we've seen in the field was just making sure you actually have a nutrient management plan prepared when there's over 300 nutrient units. There's a section, I believe, on the approval. It says, the NMP has been or will be prepared, and then you get to the field and it's actually not prepared. So make sure that you're doing that. The engineering documents, a lot of people at the time of this approval submission don't have finalized engineering documents, but they may have the engineer on retainer ready to go. So that's what all this required for the approval. But when we get to the actual inspection component, you got to make sure you have stamped engineered drawings and your site characterizations, all those kind of things that would be required as part of that inspection. Making sure that all nutrient sources have been added to the LAS and the PAR, fertilizers, compost, any of that stuff is just things that we're seeing missed more and more in the field. It might be just NASM or just, maybe the fertilizers only half included. So just things that just need to be addressed when we show up in the field. So that's all I had. It wasn't too intense, hopefully, but if there's any questions, just let me know.
Awesome.
We had one question, in the chat.
Yep.
Decommissioned well,
yep.
Is that considered a well?
No. If you have all the if you have all the decommissioning records, if you just say it's been decommissioned, that it's got to be supported with documentation, through a well tech under 903.
Yeah, so we would say a properly decommissioned well is no longer a well, is what we would say. Yeah.
Yeah, just using a backhoe and bending the casing over and then filling it in with dirt doesn't count.
Exactly. Other questions for Travis? Okay, Janet, I think we're moving to Q&A.
Yes, we are. We had lots of questions come in, which was great, and I hope I captured them all in the Q&A. And if I've missed any of your questions, please just ask them afterwards. I got to get to the right spot. Okay. So our first question, don't know who's going to field this, but if you're just doing a strategy without a plan, do you need to enter the field crop information?
Matt, you doing that, or do you want me to
No.
take it?
I think this one's yours, Dale.
Okay. Well, yeah, so when you're doing a strategy, and I'm just making sure that I'm understanding the question. If you're doing a strategy for an operation that doesn't require a plan, like field level information is not required for a strategy. So like we won't look at the graph, we won't look at the land application rates. We will make sure that there's enough land base that the manure can probably be managed, but we won't look at field level information when we're looking at a strategy.
Great.
Yep, totally agree.
Hopefully, does anybody have a follow-up question to that? Okay, on to the next one. I went too far. Number 2, can a farmer be fined for not following their nutrient management plan?
Travis or Tom, do you want to take that one?
Short answer, yes. That's pretty vague, not following, but yes, overall, that can happen and has happened in the past.
Perfect. Thanks, Travis.
I did get a follow-up question to question 1 in the chat. Even if you don't enter in your field information, someone said soil sample missing info is flagged if you don't enter it in. Is that correct?
It's probably there as a missing information flag, but it doesn't print on the strategy. It may have back in the day, but I don't think it prints on the strategy anymore, does it, Matt?
No, it does not. No.
Yeah. So it is missing information if you were going to go on and do things, but as far as doing a strategy, you don't need to enter that information.
Okay. Question 3, why are we required to sample every 5 years, but also include the last 5 years worth of spreading of data?
I'll take that one, Matt. So it sounds like this is a NASM question. If it's not, whoever asked it, please come on and make sure that I've answered your question. But simple answer is because it says so in the regulation. If you were around 22 years ago when we were having these discussions and somebody asked a why question, Dean Donaldson would have just yelled because it says so in the regulation louder and louder until somebody gave up. Anyway, more complete answer, it involves digging into the regulation to see how the things are written. Metals loading rate is a 5-year rolling total. Looks both into the future and into the past. So whatever you spread on April 1st, 2026, can't lead to a regulatory exceedance that looks for the 11 metals that looks back to April 2nd of 2021. I think I got my dates right there. Yeah, so you have to put in the old spreading data just to make sure that you're not causing a regulatory exceedance in metals. hopefully that answered the question. If this came from a strategy and plan developer and your client's generating enough manure that they need a nutrient management plan and they don't soil test at all, and they can't be shown the benefit of at least minimal soil testing, I guess refer back to the answer because it says so in the book.
Okay. I noticed there's another comment here in the chat about not following your nutrient management plan. A plan is for 5 years and things can change, which results in the plan not being followed. Is that something that would, I don't know, maybe you're referring to getting fined and things?
Yeah, I can. So it's also required you do an annual review and update. So those changes are required to be captured then. So that's how that's handled.
Good. All right, next question. And this may have already been answered. I'm not sure, Dale, in your presentation, but should a cover crop affect the agronomic balance? When inputting it into AgriSuite, it seems like it does not.
Yeah, why isn't Matt getting any questions? Yeah, so cover crops and agronomic balance, I kind of touched on this in the presentation before when we were looking at AgriSuite, how it handles cover crops. But let's think about what a cover crop does. Summer and early fall applications of manure, that can result in a long time between the nutrients being applied and a crop being grown. And so you're sitting there with a great big pool of nitrogen that can be lost through processes like volatilization and leaching and stuff like that. If you plant a cover crop after manure has been applied or some kind of nutrient source has been applied, that cover crop can take up some of those nutrients and assimilate them into a form that can't be lost through leaching or volatilization or runoff or whatever. So AgriSuite, when you put a cover crop into AgriSuite, basically what it does is it pushes that nitrogen availability estimate from manure out to the same estimate as if you'd applied it in late fall. So it does account for holding on to nitrogen. And don't forget to click that cover crop exists button in the material application screen in AgriSuite when you're doing it, and that's what turns on the timing factor.
Still,
Did that answer the question?
I believe so.
Okay, great. Not seeing anything else then, we'll go to the next one. Which there it goes. So theirs is about an irrigation system called 360 Rain to apply manure. And does it apply, how does it work with the direct flow application systems requirement of the Act?
That's a great question.
Yeah, I think we've had some conversations around this. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so like essentially when we're looking at this, I'm gonna kind of punt back to my my previous work when we talk about spray systems or pesticide application systems. I'll take it from the same point of view as that, right? So the regulation outlines what needs to be done, and the machine or whatever you're doing must meet those parts of the regulation. So we don't typically go and do improvements or stamps of approval for specific machines or equipment. So essentially, I'm going to punt back to the fact that like if the equipment can meet those parts of the regulation, right, then that it can move forward and be used. If it cannot, then you can't use it. So look to the manufacturers, look to the information provided by them. The other way to look at it is to say, okay, well, if I were to have an incident with this machine or this equipment, what would it look like if I were to have to explain to a judge or a justice as to what happened? Can I show due diligence, and does the machine demonstrate that those due diligence can be met? So that's where I would go with that. So essentially, without saying too much, we don't do approvals on equipment. The proponent is required to ensure that they do meet those requirements and demands. If you have any more like questions on that, feel free to just email me. We can discuss further.
Yeah, and I'll just add, look to section 52.73, which is on the direct flow application systems. So it does talk about a one operator system having to have full view of the area of land which the manure is being applied. So the system may or may not meet that definition. So normally for the direct flow application systems, you've got one guy in the tractor, one guy in the pump. That meets section 52.72. One person can run the system if they have full view. And it goes on to talk about being able to shut down the system within 1 minute. So that's a key piece. If something goes wrong, the system needs to be shut down within 1 minute. And I would think that would be part of the determination. If you have full view, you can shut it down within a minute. Then that may be considered meeting this requirement or not. So that would be my guidance.
Yeah, thanks, Matt, for that.
I see there's a couple comments about the system. One person found the website for it, 360rain.com, and another about their understanding is that the field boundaries are uploaded to 360 Rain before application, and it would be on the farm operator to make sure the surface water and wells are properly mapped. So those are just a couple extra comments that people can see.
Yeah, fair. And I would be advising that someone still needs to be monitoring the system, because again, one person does have to have full view of the application area as per the reg.
Good. All right, so question 6. What is the role of the consultant in MDS calculations? They were looking for some information about reasonably capable and the definition of that, and some implementation of guideline 20.
Okay, I'll take these ones. I guess if you have any specific, these are definitely MDS questions. If you have any more going forward in the future, you can definitely reach out to me directly or one of our land use planners as well. But I will take a crack at these right now. Role of the consultant in MDS calculations, I would refer them to page 6 and 7 in the implementation guidelines. A consultant if a consultant is used, they are the applicant's agent. So if you're working for the farmer, you're their agent. If you're working for a landowner that's trying to build something next to farms, you're their agent. And I guess depending on which calculation, MDS 1 or MDS 2, the number of steps that you were involved in will be dictated by which calculation you're doing. So there's 2 tables on page 6 and 7 that clearly show that. And if that doesn't satisfy you, reach out to me directly after this call or tomorrow, and we can certainly discuss it more. Reasonably capable. This relates to unoccupied or unused manure, unoccupied livestock barns or unused manure storages. And so and this is strictly an MDS 1 situation usually. So if there is a former livestock barn or former manure storage sitting on a neighboring property, there's a thing in there that says if they're no longer structurally sound or reasonably capable, you don't have to consider them for an MDS 1 setback. Reasonably capable, I would refer them once again to the implementation guidelines, page 128 to 130. Gives some suggestions of how to define that. It's a little bit vague because not every situation is exact. I guess something an example that came to mind when we were putting this together, if you had an old layer barn, it hasn't been used in a while, it's still got like A-frame cages, battery cages in it, low ceilings, maybe a 9-foot or a 10-foot ceiling. Chances are it wouldn't be reasonably capable to be reused for layer hens. It doesn't meet the current code of practice. It would be quite an expense to pull all those out and replace them. And, something like that might be an example. I guess there's various iterations of that. One of the things I will say about that, if you are doing MDS1 calculations and you run across one of these, I guess in guideline 20, it talks about, if it's deemed not to be reasonably capable, it could be from an engineer or a consultant knowledgeable about livestock facilities where appropriate. I guess if you are asked or you're doing a calculation and you want to say, no, this is no longer reasonably capable, provide some information with your, I'll give an example. So I had a call just this last year from one of our land use planners and a municipal planning official around an MDS1 calculation. And they'd hired a consultant had been hired to do the MDS setbacks. And basically they said to this municipal person, I'm a nutrient management consultant. Just trust me, that's not a livestock barn. And the question I got from this municipal person was, first of all, what is a nutrient management consultant? They had no idea. They don't deal in nutrient management per se. They're into planning more often. If they had to come back and said, I'm a nutrient management consultant certified by the province. I've been modeling livestock facilities in AgriSuite for the last 5 years, 10 years, whatever. And I don't consider this to be a livestock housing because of, and list some reasons. It probably would have gone over better, but the trust me thing didn't work. So I guess if you are doing MDS1 calculations, and they are definitely harder because you have to look at all of these neighboring properties that may or may not have livestock facilities on them. There's a bit more legwork involved with trying to assess these things. And the other one would be, contact the actual landowner to confirm whether they're using the barn or they have been using the barn or they plan to use the barn or what it was used for in the past. I guess that's usually what is involved with an MDS1 calculation. And this leads into the last bullet point. So in that last bullet, there's mention of a municipal building official. What is their role? Well, it depends if it's an MDS1 or an MDS2 calculation. MDS2 is triggered by the building permit for the livestock barn. And so it's on the building official to verify the information, all the legal information, legal requirements. So that includes nutrient management approvals and the setback requirements for MDS before they issue the building permit. On the MDS1 side, it could involve the building official. If the neighbor's trying to build a house on a property next to a property with barns on it, once again, before they issue the house permit, they need to verify that the MDS1 calculation was done and there's not going to be an issue. Otherwise, if it's another type of MDS1 calculation for rezoning or something like that, they may get asked to join the conversation by their planning colleagues. It's not absolute. The guidelines are simply that. They're guidelines. When it comes to the application and the enforcement of MDS, it's done at the municipal level. And so I think there's 400 and some municipalities across Ontario. I'd love to say they all follow things exactly the same way, but interpretation and that sometimes varies a little bit from place to place. Anyways, I don't know if that answered these questions. If you want to talk about it more, please reach out to me directly and we will try and give you a more fulsome answer if I can come up with one, or I will refer you to one of our planning colleagues on this topic.
Great, thanks, Dan. And Dan, if consultants are interested in training, is there MDS training, or is it just the website and the guidance book?
Yep, we've typically done training based on demand. There was a training course last June 2025. We had like 600 people take it. It was a 1 day, it was a Teams call, about 4 hours. This year, we have not agreed upon a date yet, but likely there will be another one coming up. And if we have more demand, we have in previous years run more than one course. It's a joint delivery between some of the environment management staff and our land use planners, because most of the MDS1 portions are planning related, and that's definitely not my area of strength. So we typically do courses. When we have them, we advertise them beforehand. Like I said, for this year, we have not set any dates yet. And the hope originally was, the hope going forward is that we might have some online e-type learning available. Unfortunately, due to budget and stuff at the moment, we haven't got that finished yet. So ideally, we'd like to have it online somewhere, but the implementation guidelines are available online. And if you are in AgriSuite, if you're in the MDS tools, if you go to other resources, the link is there to the implementation guidelines. If you want to get a copy, if you haven't already got one, it's a good place to start.
Great, thanks, Dan.
And I think this next question will be our last one. Once it comes up, there. So someone's had a couple farmers ask about PFAs, especially after hearing more stories about farmers losing their livelihood in the US. Are there any updates you can share?
Okay, I guess I'll take this one. So I'm Benoit Lebeau. I'm the NASM specialist engineer working in the same unit as Steve and Dan. So on the PFAS file, just not to take too much time on this topic here. I guess we're over time already. But I guess what you may have heard the stories of PFAS contamination in agricultural setting in the States is really not something that we can compare to in Ontario. I guess the situation is quite different. These contaminated sites in the States have received biosolid or pulp and paper mill biosolid that were highly contaminated with PFAS, and I guess if you have followed the file a little bit in Canada, the Canadian fertilizer, the Canadian fertilizer, not the CFIA, the Canadian Fertilizer Inspection Agency, has set a interim limit of 50 ppb for PFAS, which is one of the compound of PFAS. And some of the cases in the States have concentration over 60,000 ppb. So that gives you a range. It's just it's not comparable at all. So we in Ontario, we're following, I guess, the files, see what other jurisdictions are doing. MECP and OMAFA has done some sampling of about 20 municipal wastewater treatment plant in Ontario, collecting about 30 samples in 2024, 2025. And all of these samples have been less than 50 ppb. So I guess PFAS is not something new that has been studied in Ontario. It's been looked at in early 2000, and it's just the recent cases in the States that came up that kind of created an alarm in the biosolid industry. But in the States, they were producing PFAS and manufacturing PFAS compounds and things like that. And that's why we have seen higher concentration in the States than in Ontario. So we are continuing to monitor what's happening in that field. I guess, the federal government has taken some action to address concerns over PFAS. So we're following what the feds are doing, but also other jurisdiction in Canada and in the States. So again, for farmers in Ontario, given the regulatory framework that we have, the biosolid application restriction that we have of the loading rate every 5 years and so, there is some PFAS obviously in biosolid generated in Ontario because it's everywhere in the environment, unfortunately. But it's the level are not comparable to what is being reported in contaminated site and in some of the states.
Great, thanks, Benoit.
Any follow-up questions on that? Somebody asked, what are the typical concentration of PFAS in Ontario sewage biosolids?
So again, I guess the CFIA has set a interim limit of 50 ppb, so just as a reference, and that is quite, low compared to the 60,000 ppb. But in Ontario, the measurement that we've seen out of about 30 samples in 2024, 2025 is less than 50, more around the 20 ppb. But it can be even less than that, like 5 to 10 ppb. So, and yeah, so
Okay, that is all of our questions in case anyone, unless anyone has some other ones. Someone had mentioned that there was a booth at the London Farm Show about somebody who was not in support at all of biosolids, about the so I don't know what kind of group that would be, but not one that you'd be in favor of then, Benoit.
no, well, we like to, I guess, address their concerns. So we do get concerns from time to time on, the contact center gets questioned, and sometimes it's a lack of understanding or a lack of information or just a straight opposition. So.
Right. Great. Okay, so I can't get, oh, there. I am going to be applying for CEUs, for Certified Crop Advisors for this meeting. For those who are interested, now that I've made notes of how long each of the presentations were and what information was in them, I will submit those for credit. And once they've been approved, I will send out a sign-in sheet to all those who registered for the meeting and who attended so that they can claim all those if they need them. And I also want to thank all of our experts today for taking the time to make these excellent presentations. At the beginning of planning, I start back in December. I always think, oh, is there enough to talk about? Can we make it worthwhile? And every time I think, wow, that's great information that even me, who's not really involved in it that much, I learn something every time. So I do appreciate everyone taking the time to create these presentations.
And we thank you, Janet, for organizing this every year.
No problem. I haven't been around for 23 years, but I've been around for half of those, I think, of those meetings. And this probably isn't my penultimate. This could be my ultimate. Would that be called? This is probably my last one. So it's been great.
Great.
So,
thanks, everybody.
all right. Thank you all. And you'll be hearing from me later with the CEU information.
Great. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.